morning. Thanks for coming out this fine morning. Kind of a gully washer last night. I heard the Western got flooded again. My daughter was at the Sunset and they got flooded. So I hope all your homes and businesses and hangouts survived. But it's good to be here. Thank you. Good to see everybody. We're going to mix it up a little bit and just kick off with Shannon Lewis, who's the director of the Helena branch of the Minneapolis Federal Reserve Bank. Come on up, Shannon. Last time you might remember Mr. Kashkari was here, and he got a little cut off, or we didn't give him quite enough time. So we're going to reverse the order a little bit this morning, and Shannon's going to talk to us about her job and her role. She's keeping the interest rates as low as possible, and inflation down, and all that. And then we'll have some announcements and some back and forth. I know Eric Griffin's here, and Dan Ponch has got something for us, and others might as well. So we'll get there, but let's kick off and give a good warm welcome to Ms. Shannon Lewis.
Thanks everyone for having me this morning. So I think Haley is going to drive a PowerPoint that I have this morning, and I think just to level set, the Federal Reserve right now is in its quiet period, so I will not be talking about decisions that may be made this week out of the FOMC. We'll leave that to Jerome Powell. So I won't be talking about any of that. It's kind of what the Federal Reserve does when we're getting ready to go into FOMC meetings, is we really kind of don't, because it can, cause shifts in the market. We don't want to cause any of that. So again, I'm Shannon Lewis. I am with Regional Outreach and Public Affairs with the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis. I work and live here in Helena, so I work at the branch. And just quickly, I do also offer public tours. So if you're ever interested in coming into the branch and seeing kind of our operation and what we do there, I'm happy to entertain emails, and I'm happy to share that email with Jim and Haley when we're done today. So if you do have a group of folks, I would love to host you. So with that, Haley, I think you can advance to the next slide. So what I like to do in always our disclaimer, the views expressed here are my own and not necessarily those of the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis or the Federal Reserve System. So go ahead and advance. What I like to always do, especially when I'm with Helena people, is I like to give a kind of a high-level history and background. And this isn't a room of 80 people, so if you have any questions, please feel free to ask as I kind of proceed through the presentation. It doesn't have to be one-sided. I know it's early, so I don't want to put anyone to sleep, So a little bit about the history and background of the Federal Reserve. So as Jim, you can go ahead and advance. As Jim pointed out, the Federal Reserve, we are the third attempt at a central bank in the United States, the system that we have today. Montana has a little claim to fame in how that was established. A copper king named F. Augustus Heinze actually went to New York in 1907 and tried to curb the stock on copper. That led to a massive financial crisis that led to a bailout of both our banking system and the federal government by J.P. Morgan, the man. And then he organized a group of influential members of Congress and senators when kind of hatched the plan on what a central bank in the United States could look like. It took many Congresses to get it passed, but in 1913, the system that they decided on was established, and that's kind of where we are today. That system hasn't changed much since then. You can go ahead and advance this slide. Structure and governance. We are considered a decentralized regional structure. We're decentralized, and I think that that's kind of an important facet of how we do our work. I'm here in Montana. I think, many countries have a central bank that is located in the capital, that is located in one location. The decentralized structure allows for us to work across the country and definitely report on economic conditions from all corners of our country. So we are a combination of federal government and public oversight, meaning that the Board of Governors that is in Washington, D.C., that most of us know about the Federal Reserve, those folks and the people that work for them, those are federal employees. The rest of us who work at reserve banks and who work at the branches, we are actually private employees. We are independent from the government. That doesn't mean we're not accountable, right? So we have a board of governors that helps with all that oversight, but we're also accountable to the public and we're accountable to Congress. And then, yeah, branches are governed by a board of directors. Okay, go ahead and proceed to the next slide. So our districts, so we are in the 9th district of the Federal Reserve System. I always think this map is quite interesting. And when you think about 1913 and you think about where population centers were located, you're looking along the eastern seaboard, right? That's where the bulk of the United people that lived in our country were located. San Francisco, for example, now, over there in the 12th district, that's a massive swath of land. In 1913, there wasn't a lot happening there, but now you have the San Francisco Fed, which oversees a lot of major economic activity for our country and certainly globally. So you can proceed to the next slide. All of the Federal Reserve banks were actually opened on the same day in November 1914, and our Helena branch was established in 1921. Go to the next slide. And we were, and Jim did put this in his overview, so we are by far the smallest branch city to host a Federal Reserve bank. A lot of that was then and continues to be driven by our banking community. So with our bankers advocated for us to be here. Norman Holter, who was serving on the Minneapolis board, certainly saw how much economic activity was happening in Montana, advocated for us to be established here. That picture is of our first reserve bank. It was destroyed in the earthquakes in the 30s. And then we moved, many of you maybe have been to the Park Avenue building. We were in Park Avenue. And then our building that we are in today was finished in 1990. So you can proceed to the next slide. And then now we'll dig in a little bit to the roles of the Fed. Any comments or questions on the history? I know we've got history buffs in the room. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to share that my grandfather was the gentleman with a guard who used to sit out front. When you walk in, there was a guard. The guards
at the Park Avenue building, or
Park Avenue.
Nice. And our law enforcement. So your grandfather was a guard. Post 9/11, that was just yesterday, when we kind of started to see some of the vulnerabilities in our financial system. Our guards then transitioned into they are federal law enforcement now, and they're wonderful people, but they don't screw them. So the roles of the Fed. So we provide financial services to depository institutions. We regulate and supervise banks. We maintain the stability of the financial system. Conduct monetary policy and public affairs. But I'm really going to kind of move fairly quickly through a couple of these because I know that people are always interested in kind of monetary policy, and I find that my audiences are also very interested in kind of how we get insight into and provide insight and can influence monetary policy. So go ahead and move to the next slide. So providing financial services, we are considered to be the banker's bank. We're also considered to be the government's bank. Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis is the only bank that does provide treasury services. So if you have savings bonds, Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis would be the one that would help you cash those bonds, check their value, all of that stuff. So we provide those services as part of the treasury. So you can go to the next slide. So providing financial services to banks, we oversee the currency operation in the United States. We oversee multiple payment lines, so automated clearinghouse, that's where most of us regular people, our transactions are going through ACH. Check, Dan was talking about the check operation today, and many of you who are familiar with the Helena branch know that we did have a large check operation initially. All of that check operation, and this is part of how we look for efficiencies in the system, that check operation, all checks in the United States are now processed in Atlanta. So the Atlanta Federal Reserve does all checks. I was actually just talking about it today. I was like, I had to write 2 checks this year. I pay my dentist office and pay my electrician, and I took checks. I had to find my checkbook, and I don't think I'm unique in that, right? Where every time you write a check, for some of us it can be, are they sequential? So, and then we also do wholesale payments. So large payments that may run from large businesses, large banks to each other. So those are things that most of us in this room probably wouldn't, interact with those payment lines, but we do provide those large services as well. You can move to the next slide. And so when I think about these payment channels and kind of the payments that the Federal Reserve oversees, you can kind of look at it like an inverted triangle where you have the bulk of your transactions are not going to equal the highest value, the highest dollar value. So you can kind of look at it, think of it that way, where, most of us, again, in that Fed ACH, we're doing 64, 65 million transactions a day, and that's only equal to 122 billion. But then if you look at like our larger like Fed securities, we're not doing that many transactions. We're only doing about 77,000 a day, but we're looking at 1.2 trillion in those, and that's the same with Fed wire funds. So those are very large transactions, and we oversee those. Payment networks as well. So when I was talking a little bit about the Helena branch and what we were doing in the check space, the Helena branch actually has an award from the Smithsonian on how we were able to scale major efficiencies in our check program. So prior to 9/11 in the 90s, the Helena branch was actually responsible for the first check imaging, pilot program, piloting getting an image instead of your check back from your bank. Post 9/11, that kicked over into high gear, and now we are today where check imaging is the standard. You're not going to receive your check back in the mail, and that also, that efficiency led to consolidation in our check program. That's when they all moved to Atlanta. So that was a major change that was started here at the branch. We were small enough and efficient enough that we could pilot that program. So really kind of a cool thing that we were able to do in the 90s here in Helena. And I do talk about it here, so 97, and then post 9/11, they put that check 21 into full effect. So, and I do understand from folks that was quite a deal when people all of a sudden didn't get a paper check in the mail, and they kind of were like, but that's the standard today, and that was started in our branch. I forgot I left that slide in, so. Providing financial services with the governor's bank, the government's bank. Again, that's treasury services and then fiscal agency services. I was talking today, this morning with Dan again. I just happened to be sitting with Dan, and we were talking about, like military payments, any kind of your civil service payments for federal employees, that's all running through ACH. That's a service that we at the Federal Reserve provide to the government. So part of that treasury service. Regulating and supervising financial institutions. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but you can go to the next slide. Everyone in this room, I leave this slide in because, I just think it's always important to kind of reiterate, this is kind of the flow chart of how regulation works, how it all works. Congress will pass the law, the Federal Reserve will interpret that, we will write the rules and kind of decide how we're going to oversee that process. The public weigh in, and then, if that kind of gets stuck in a loop, if there are major modifications, that can kind of get stuck there for a while. And then, of course, once that's through that process for public comment, that's going to go on, and we're going to educate all of our examiners and our banks on kind of the expectations for that law, and that's how it works. In a clean system, that's how it works. And everybody's pretty familiar with this process. We live in a government town, so it's no different than fishing regulations, really. So you can go to the next slide. So the types of institutions that we oversee, we don't oversee all of them. So we don't oversee like a Wells Fargo, we don't oversee big banks. That's the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency that oversees the largest banks. But we do oversee state chartered banks, bank holding companies, savings and loans, foreign branches of U.S. banks, and U.S. operations of foreign banks. So that's with the Federal Reserve, that's under our umbrella. You do apply, if you want to be regulated by the Federal Reserve, you do apply to be a regulated entity. I used to have a slide in here, it was all the way from 22, I felt it was outdated, but Montana, actually for the 9th District, we do boast the most banks that we regulate at the Federal Reserve. Montana has the highest volume. They also have the highest cash asset. So out of any of our other states in the district. So next slide. We actually didn't always have bank examiners here. So in 1973, Minneapolis actually sent the first set of bank examiners to Helena. That's when we kind of really got deep into the bank regulatory space. The first bank that was in our portfolio is the State Bank of Malta. I love this picture, and the CEO out there is just a wonderful, wonderful person, and loves to talk about the history of that bank. That is still an independent bank. It is still regulated by the Federal Reserve, though it doesn't look like that anymore. So conducting monetary policy, and you can just go right to the next slide. So this is my only animation. As folks know, and this is what most people know about the Federal Reserve, is monetary policy and the dual mandate. So stable prices and maximum employment, that is our dual mandate. And this is how we those are the two things that we're looking to influence the economy. So you can go to the next slide. So the FOMC, which I'm not going to get deep into because we all have agreed that we're not going to talk a ton about these guys, but the FOMC are the ones that make those decisions on and influence monetary policy based on that dual mandate. The FOMC, and this is in your handy FedEx cleaned document. So this includes the seven governors, 5 bank presidents vote, always the Bank of New York, and then all of the other presidents from the Reserve. They also always weigh in on what's happening in economies in their districts. So even when you're rotating off, rotating on, you're still at the table, you're still having these conversations about what is happening. So you can go to the next slide. So how do we contribute to monetary policy? As regular people, regular Montanans, how do we ensure that folks who are in these spaces know what's happening in our place? Well, part of that is through gathering economic intelligence and through our boards of directors and advisory councils, in addition to a number of other things I'm going to get into. So Montana directors, they provide a significant amount of business and economic intelligence. I know Mary Rutherford is online. She's pictured up there. Everybody here knows Mary. She is one of our directors for the branch. So we have 5 Montana directors, in addition to a Montana director who serves on the Minneapolis board, Sarah. Our current board is Bobby Bolstein, and she's up in the Flathead area. Mary Rutherford, of course, who's here with the Montana Community Foundation. Al Ekblad, who is retired from AFL-CIO. Mr. Bill Keller, who's with Independence Bank out of Havre. And then Jason Adams, who is Confederated de la Chicoutimi and who does tribal housing policy nationally. He consults with tribes on housing. So what we do when we're getting ready for both our board meetings and I also oversee the 9th District Advisory Council. 2 of our directors will receive an economic question that's developed by our economists, approved by President Kashkari, of any kind of information that he would like going into the FOMC meeting. So they will go out to their business contacts, which, right, we all have a network. Every person in here has a very different and diverse network. So we're looking for what their business contacts in their region, in their space, would respond to these questions. And these vary every board meeting, every advisory council meeting. We're looking for any kind of qualitative information that can help supplement the quantitative information that we're already getting from our economists. So that's one way that we're gathering economic intelligence and ensuring that our voices are heard. We can move to the next slide. The other way, and this is a public-facing document, this is a document that comes out before the FOMC meeting, so this is out there. It comes out before the FOMC meeting. Every district in the Federal Reserve System publishes a 2-page narrative that contributes to the Beige Book. I always have to joke, the Beige Book sounds like something that the Federal Reserve put together. It's pretty boring. That's a summary of commentary on current economic conditions. And you can go to the next page. So it's all anecdotal, right? So our folks that write the beige book, they sit in on our board meetings, they sit in on our advisory council meetings. They also have their networks and their survey work that contributes to this. So it is a snapshot of the current economy. It is a source for the media. The media definitely pour over the beige book. The second it's released, they're looking for any kind of hint on any decision that may be made at the end of this meeting that we're not talking about today. And it is a symbol. So it's definitely, you know, a regular symbol that the Federal Reserve puts out, you know, to showcase our effort to connect to regular people and businesses across our district. So we can go to the next slide. Again, there are 2 pages for each district. Mandatory sections include employment and wages, right? So this goes into that dual mandate. Like, we want to know about it. And we want to know if people are hiring, if people are having trouble hiring, maybe they have not enough applicants, or they, you know, there's a tight labor market, or it's loosening. Prices, optional sections, consumer spending, services. We always report on construction and real estate, manufacturing, agriculture. I believe that we submit on energy as well. And then the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis has an additional section, which kind of came about in 2020 on the worker experience. So what are workers experiencing in the economy versus what the business may be experiencing in the economy. That has had a lot of traction, where other reserve banks are starting to look at how to kind of describe what's happening with workers, you know, versus business. And minority and women-owned businesses and small business. And if you think about our district, you know, outside of the Twin Cities, we're a small business. Even if you have 500 employees in our districts, that's relatively small compared to some of the large corporations that are in other parts of the country. So it's really important for us to report on small business. And then there's public affairs and community development, and this is what I do. So I work with the team that does beige book. I am also front-facing. Again, I do tours. I also go out into our communities and I get to meet with people. But you can go to the next slide. So all reserve banks kind of support community development on the wholesale level. So in 1977, we passed the Community Reinvestment Act, and so all reserve banks have kind of a larger department that looks at all kinds of issues that impact low or moderate income families. So for us, for example, the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, we have been studying childcare since the 70s. We study things like housing accessibility. We study, you know, do regular families have access to affordable housing? Tana? I don't know. And then we also do, you know, and that department is overseen by Elaine Chermoff. And then in Helena, the Center for Indian Country Development, almost everyone here knows Casey Lozar. He oversees the Center on Indian Country Development. That center was established, I want to say, 2020, 21, and that is looking specifically at kind of data gaps and policy in Indian country. So they are doing a lot of research on how to fill those data gaps, you know, to try and elevate our, you know, our tribal communities to be a little bit more than asterisks on every report that you get. So it's really important work. And then again, with public affairs and regional outreach, it's myself, my colleagues, Eric Garcia Luna, Joe Mann, and Ron Wirtz, and we support the board and the district through our outreach efforts. And that includes for myself, I oversee all of President Kashkari's travel. I kind of oversee how we interact with people across our district. That's what I have this morning. I'm happy to field questions or comments. I know that people have visited the Fed and are interested. Yes, sir.
Wait, I don't know if I can be heard. Bob Jones, local guy. What is it? Two fingers. Right. Down Bob Jones. Thanks for this. I am curious about your research function, and it used to be entirely economists, correct?
Sure.
And is that still true? And if so, are we talking newer school behavioral economists? Or are we talking about some of the old school kind of classical economics?
I don't have a specific answer to that, but I do know that our research department is currently economists, so PhD level economists. We also have the Opportunity and Inclusive Growth Institute that also houses a number of economists. So I think some of your like behavior economists may be more housed over there. So kind of looking at behavior and how that influences your decisions in the economy. So I think it's a mix of both. And I will say that, we also have, master's level economists that are spread throughout, the Federal Reserve that aren't necessarily a part of research. So the Federal Reserve as a system, we do employ more economists than any other entity in the United States. And those are kind of all levels. And most of us have some degree of at least data analytics, because that's what we do. Yeah.
I want to ask about the housing issue, and it sounds like there's research being done. Does the Federal Reserve have a role in trying to figure out how to address the challenges we're facing around that?
So they are doing here's what I know. I do know that we are continuing to look at housing and look at policy triggers. I know that my colleague, Libby, was here for the Montana Housing Conference. This is really her specialty area. She focuses heavily in that housing policy space. I haven't seen a ton that we've published recently that's specific to Montana housing. We did just publish an article on insurance and how insurance is influencing even housing affordability, and that does have a lot of anecdotes from Montana. So what I will say is that they are looking at, how do different land policies and laws influence the ability to build housing. We are watching it closely because it's a huge indicator for us to look at housing and construction. So I can follow up with a bit more and connect to, are you in the housing space? Or housing curious? I think everyone in this room is probably pretty housing curious.
I'm a reporter that covers housing stuff.
Sure.
Sort of.
I do know that they are looking at all of so we don't make policy recommendations, right? So we will review them. It's basically like, if you do this could happen. If you do this could happen. We don't necessarily make a policy recommendation. We're, again, independent, right? So I will say, they are looking at the laws passed in the 2023 legislative session and how those could impact, getting more housing online. But it's really kind of, when we talk to folks who are in the housing space, whether that's, your municipalities or county governments, people, Jacob Coons has joined us, people that are trying to get housing online, I think a lot of that is going to wait and see how it will impact, because some of it is very new. Some of these different land use laws are new. So, yes.
You mentioned nobody's using checks anymore, which has had the side effect basically of transferring everything to credit cards and putting billions of dollars in the pocket of Visa and MasterCard every year. And so other countries, Canada is one, I know there are several European countries, have a national electronic transfer system so that the government is actually processing all those transfers and it's not sending all that money, a cut of every transaction, into corporate hands. Is there any movement to create a national electronic transfer system in the U.S.?
That would be with the Board of Governors. I don't have a good answer to that. I do know that banks who use ACH, who use our payment channels, there are fees associated with a lot of that. The Federal Reserve, we do, everything costs money. I don't know, the answer to that question about a national payment line.
Good morning, Shannon. I'm Michael O'Neill with the Helena Housing Authority. Thank you for coming this morning. Really really appreciated the effort you made to invite folks from the kind of social service network this past summer to meet and identify issues that are really impacting lower-income residents. Just wanted to let you know and follow up that we are continuing our efforts to do a statewide study of rents in Montana. That closes, we're trying to hire a vendor with Montana Department of Commerce, and that study will be done between now and the end of the year, and really identify and document the unprecedented rapid rent increases we've experienced just locally here since 2019. August 1st, Washington Post reported for about 59% rent increase since 2019, and most of that has come from California. And so it's really one of the hardest hit areas here in Helena and Montana is one of the hardest hit states in the post-COVID impact on our housing.
I appreciate that. And yeah, just for folks in the room, I know I saw this morning there's going to be a fuse. Looks like a round table. I think that is a really innovative thing that's happening in our community on how we try and look at housing, as a health issue. And a great group of people working on that. But I did invite in, I know Emily was there, I know Michael was there, a fairly large group of community stakeholders to kind of talk about specific issues in Helena. And I was able to partner with the FDIC and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency to do that listening session, and I think it was, one, very well received. It was something that, they don't really do all the time, but it was a very valuable morning, and a little bit of my own personal embarrassment in that Emily and I, got stuck in the branch elevator for the first time ever, and that was quite embarrassing, and a lot of anxiety around that, but, we lived to tell the tale. Any other questions? And I see John Sack is here. I'll be up at Carroll College with your business class next week. And then there, I believe that it's an economics class or maybe finance. We're going to be doing the West branch. So love talking to students.
I got a question.
Yes.
Thanks for the presentation. So with the check writing going away, I know Helena lost a bunch of jobs there from the Fed, and the building then took on a bunch of tenants over the years, not using much of the space. So is there any updates on whether the Helena branch would either go away at some time, or it's been 100 years since that started, would there other branches be opened in other parts of the region, just changing the demographics and whatnot since all that started?
I haven't heard of anything about the Helena branch going away, and I'll tell you, part of that really is our cash operation keeps our bank supervision function keeps our branch relevant. So yeah, we have tenants in there. It's a large, beautiful space. I do think that, as business processes change, it is unfortunate when you have jobs that kind of go away. A lot of the folks that were in check are surprisingly, there are a number of folks who still work at the Helena branch in different roles. But to answer your question, so the Helena branch does have a cash operation. We serve over 400 different financial institutions across Montana and Wyoming. We also pick up work from other reserve banks that maybe don't have capacity to process all of their currency. So long as that business function is there, we will continue to be here. And I think part of that is even as the Federal Reserve as a system looks at streamlining operations, you look at Helena and where we serve, it's rural. Like, you don't save any money shifting currency via highway to a different reserve bank, say Salt Lake, say Denver. We really are serving a pretty large area that can't really easily be served through another bank.
The beige book, if I understood correctly, provides 2 pages per reserve location.
Correct.
As the West population has built up, I would think that there is perhaps much more anecdotal information coming out of the East Coast than out of that great wide swath represented by San Francisco. is there any possibility of increasing the number of Western stories getting to the Eastern ears who don't always understand what it's like out there?
Well, I think, no, there's not conversation, because like, we don't want to really expand the beige book, right? So you're not looking at, and we have additional pages for those anecdotes. Again, that beige book is kind of that snapshot in time. And the people do read it, so a lot of East Coast folks are trying to understand different economies. I mean, think about, you know, our Reserve Bank 9th district, we are the 3rd largest district in the system, and we are the least populated in the system. But you also look at reserve banks like Kansas City, that's also writing about Wyoming, parts of Kansas City, parts of Colorado, that are also highly rural and Western specific. So even though we're all a bit different, I think that the narratives provided in the beige book are offering kind of that real-time snapshot for FOMC, for the FOMC, for the public, for the media, to better understand what's happening across the country.
I was going to ask Mary.
My boss.
Good morning. I would add a couple of points and excellent presentation. First, we made the beige book. One of our directors reported something very fascinating about worker shortages and what employers are doing to bring in employees. And so that made the beige book. We had our little celebration, so we're very proud of that. Secondly, while check writing has gone away, not everyone's used their credit card. A lot of folks actually use more than debit cards, and so maybe that addresses that middle issue that someone had raised. And finally, I would just say, if you're at all interested in this information, please go to the website. Because I have been shocked as a layperson to see the amount and the quality of research that is, and research findings that are posted on the website. You can read all of the facts that Shannon's referencing. Finally, the Fed has this dual mandate, but they only have one tool. They have the dual mandate of stable pricing and maximum employment, and the only thing that they can do is adjust interest rates. So as a layperson, it's been fascinating to learn for it. Thank you, Shannon, for excellent presentation.
Yeah, and we do talk about that tool. And, for folks who, the interest rate, it's not all interest rates, right? So it's the interest rate, the overnight rate, that's the rate that banks pay each other for borrowing money overnight for short-term business. That's the interest rate that we're talking about. But that definitely influences your interest rate on your credit card, your car loan, your home loan. But it rolls out a little bit slower than when we make those adjustments. And that's, one of the reasons that it's so highly watched. So what's happening at FOMC today on what they're going to do with that rate, that federal funds rate, everybody is watching because everybody knows how that influences you and your dollar, if you're a small business owner, if you're looking to access capital, all of that is highly watched. So, yeah, it's a pretty nuanced thing. One of my colleagues equated it to we are conducting monetary policy with a floor scanner. I think it's the only tool that we have, but as we have all seen over the past many years, it's highly effective in how, loosening or tightening access to capital. Thank you all for having me this morning. I like to have about 10 people. If you have 10 people and you want to come. Happy to have it. Thank you.
Very good, Shannon. Have a seat here, Shannon. Or wherever you'd like. But yeah, here. Well, thank you very, very much, Shannon. Now, I come at this from a historical point of view, and if memory serves, this goes back to the founding of the country. Alexander Hamilton was the real champion of the national government being able to take on big projects. And it's evolved into what we have today. So thank you very, very much, Shannon. And Mary, thanks for your service on the Board of Governors. We're very fortunate here in Helena to have this this institution in our midst. But let's talk a little more about other things that people might have on their minds. Dan?
Yeah. You know, you really impress somebody from the Federal Reserve if you're carrying some real money in your pocket. But if you have a chance to drive by their location there on Neil Avenue, look at that historical marker that isn't there. That used to be the home of the Great Northern Railroad. But after that, more importantly, it was the home of the Holter Research Foundation, where Jeff Holter developed the Holter monitor, heart monitor, and that saved millions of lives. I was quite fortunate when I was just a youngster in middle school. That was the first job I ever had. When they shrunk that monitor down from the size of an awfully big hand purse, handbag, down into something that fit your shirt pocket, except the battery pack was about 4 times bigger than the monitor. But, so it should be a historical marker there just for the great work that Jeff Holter did for all the health community work. But the real reason I wanted to talk this morning was about yesterday. And they put out a pretty good thing on our email about those kids in college that weren't born when 9/11 happened. So for the occasion, I got out my 9/11 hat. It's about 23 years old, and I got ground zero when I was there and looking at that hole in the ground and walking around that church with all the memorability that was hanging on the fences that actually went into the museum. But the most tragic part of that really bothers me is those kids that are in college. The aftermath of that attack was 20 years of their life. The U.S. government was at war for all of their lifetime. So that tragedy that took 3,000 lives was just the iceberg. At the memorial yesterday, they added 34 new names of first responders that died from diseases caused by that. But they don't talk about the tens of thousands of veterans that have died because of that, because we went to war. So when we look at that moment, we can't just think that happened and that was the end of it. We got to think of the planes leaving Afghanistan with all the people hanging off of it, and all the soldiers that are suffering from PS, post-traumatic stress syndrome. You know, only 10% of them veterans that have got disability from that 20 years of war have visual wounds. The rest are all mental, from tragic brain injuries, sexual assault, and stuff like that. So we need to keep that in mind all the time when we think about what happens when we go to war and we never quit.
Hand that mic off to Eric Griffin there.
And one thing that Ann didn't tell you, hold this mic up like this if you're going to break wind, because it'll catch up.
Thanks, Dan. This is a great lead into why I'm here. My name is Eric Griffin. I'm on the board of directors for Helena NAMI. Our 21st annual Montana Walk is coming up on September 22nd. Just a little bit of a talk about where my journey started with mental health. The episode that started my journey was my son, when he was 18, just getting ready to graduate from high school, he shot his friend in my basement. And that was the episode that started my journey. My son is now in a program in Ohio that is totally funded by the state of Ohio, where here in Montana, there are no services here. This is one of our main fundraisers throughout the year. 1 in 5 families experience some type of mental illness in I think it's probably more than that, but that's a figure that we have there. Our goal is $125,000. What do we use this money for? We provide support for Montana families, education. I teach a class for families, family-to-family class every year for people struggling in families, how to deal with it. Most other members of the families get forgotten when you have somebody with a severe mental illness in their family. How do you contribute? I would like you to contribute to my team, which is the Grateful Heads. And probably the best way to do that would be to take, everybody get their phones out right now, type in my phone number, which is 406-461-1168. And then I'll get your number, and then I will respond back with the website that goes right to my team. And or if you don't want to donate to my team, we can go www.namimt.org. The walk is Sunday, the 22nd of September. Festivities open at 11 a.m. and the program begins at 12:30. Please join us and or support NAMI Montana. It is some of the people in NAMI Montana have basically, Gary Mihelish, Matt Kuntz, these people have just been a wonderful to me, and I don't know if I would have made it without NAMI. It's an amazing organization. I remember having lunch with Gary Mihelish one time, and it's just about as low as I could possibly get. And Gary told me, he says, well, if you can keep your son alive until he's 30, you might have a chance. Well, my son will be 34 in May, and he's still alive, and he has just decided to crawl out of his hole. So I appreciate your support, and look forward to seeing your phone number come across my phone here.
Eric, give us your phone number again.
Yeah, sure. All right. Once again, my phone number is 406-461-1168. And guarantee the money will stay in Helena and or Montana, and nothing goes back to the national organization. So nice to be back here again and see a lot of familiar faces from years ago. So thanks, and thank God for the rain today. So thank you. And one other thing I'd like to say is I'd like to see the mayor back in as good a shape as he is. So good to see you, Mayor.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you. It's nice to know your boy's doing well. Riley is a fine young man. He's suffering from a disabling illness. I used to see Eric and Riley early in the morning delivering the Sunday New York Times all around Helena. Well, who wants this microphone next? Give John, well, you can have this one, John. Come on up. Go Saints. Good to see you, sir.
I'll second that about Jim here. You're looking awesome. You're going to run a half marathon, I understand. Looks great. I just wanted to follow up on Dan's comment about the importance of remembering our veterans, and especially the post 9/11 veterans and their families. One of the things I just like to remind everyone, Carroll College is a yellow ribbon school. That means that a post 9/11 veteran can go to Carroll College free. They can stay at Carroll College free and get money for books. So spread the word about that. It's an incredible benefit. Also, just want to thank Phil. I had a great guest editorial in the Helena IR today talking about our Pell Promise. And that's something we're really excited about. And this is something new that Carroll College is doing, but any students who are Pell eligible and have a 3.0 GPA can go to Carroll College tuition free. So if you know of some students who are Pell eligible and are at a 3.0 GPA or higher, they have an opportunity to go to Carroll College for free. So thank you. You bet.
Very good. Thank you, John. Ross, you got the play coming up.
That's right, another chance to support the artists in Helena. I hope you'll all do. I'm going to tell you a quick anecdote about what it's like to be a small producer in Helena. We were going to produce another show about a nuclear accident, and our director got called in to help out Bransford. He was going to try and do both, but it didn't work out. And so 1 month before our show was to go up, he said, it's not going to happen. And so we had to scramble to find something to fill that slot in our schedule, but we didn't want to just flake out. We wanted to keep presenting new theater for you guys. And a friend of mine who lives part-time in Paris and part-time in New Orleans happened to be on the Fringe circuit doing a rotation of 3 shows that he wrote. And I called him up and I said, can you come to Helena, Montana? And he thought of it and he said, yeah, when? And so he's going to come here the 19th through the 21st. It's going to be a 4-day run and do one of his one-man shows. And he's an amazing singer, he's an amazing storyteller. And the name of this show is Singing into the Dark, 1933. And it's set in Germany, 1933, when the brown shirts were pulling people off the street that they didn't like. Maybe they were communists, maybe they were Jews, maybe they were Romani, maybe they were homosexuals, maybe they had blue hair. If they didn't like you, you got pulled off the street and into a re-education. And in this show, he recreates that experience where one actor comes to the theater to find out that all the other actors are gone, they've been pulled off into the camps. And so, in defiance of them, he decides to perform the entire show by himself. And so you're getting music of that era, you're getting the education about what happened to people in 1933. It's a really powerful show. 4 days only, starting opening next Thursday, evening performance Thursday, Friday, Saturday, matinee on Sunday. Hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Yeah, some of those people were jazz musicians or kids who were enamored with U.S. jazz. That'll be really good. You got a card on your table. Who'd like this mic that Annie has? Yeah, Mr. Driscoll. John, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks, Jim. I'm not going to speak very long. Yesterday I put out that if I get elected to Congress, I strongly feel we should have a no first use of our nuclear weapons because of what happened on 9/11. Strangely enough, even though zoo animals, children, dogs, visiting tourists, anybody else that might have been in Washington would have been killed if that had been a nuclear weapon that hit the Pentagon. The thing that is left in my mind after all these years is all the built environment, the Jefferson Memorial, Lincoln Memorial, Kennedy Center that would have been flattened and gone into the dustbin of history. It's hard to recreate what we've accomplished as a country. I feel very strongly that we need to have no first use of our nuclear weapons. And then with that, I'd like to introduce Riley Neal, who is a woman who is also running as a write-in for this job that I'm myself and Commissioner Downing are putting on him for. And the reason I would like to introduce her is I think it's really important for people to get off the couch and stop watching the television and expect to be fed stuff. And she's making an effort. I did that one time. I was not successful, but what I had to say was important about the upcoming war in Iraq based on my experience in the National Military Command Center. So I'd like, if you don't mind, Riley, to introduce you and have you come up and say your piece.
Come on up, Ms. Neal. Very cool.
Hi, my name is Riley Neal, and I'm running as a write-in candidate for U.S. Congress. I am a Democrat, and I served as a Democrat in the Montana State House as a representative for Livingston and Park County. So I'm running a write-in campaign, so my slogan is Write-in Riley. And I'm happy to chat with any of you after the program. Thank you.
Hang on to that mic, Ms. Neal, Riley. Thank you for running, and good luck to you. Annie, who owns that mic next?
I don't know, we don't have very many takers right now, Jim. They're not as curious as normal. I'm sure there's, I see one.
Yeah, Emily, very cool.
So I put the cards out on the table for the Fuse Summit coming up. You can register as of now. You can go to the website. It is on the St. Peter's Health website. This will be our third summit. Fuse has come every year when we do the summit to discuss the data, the good work that the case managers there are doing. We have a really good session set up for this year. We're going to talk about a lot of things that are coming up for the legislative session and how that will affect our clients. And we'll have the landlord breakfast like we normally do. We're going to talk about Medicaid expansion. We're going to talk about how housing and criminal justice intersect. A lot of really good stuff. So go check that out. It's October 7th through the 11th. All of the classes will take place at the St. Pete's Health Education Center this year. You can register today. It's all free.
And when, tell us again when it is going to be again?
October 7th through the 11th.
All right, very good. Thank you. Thanks, Em. Well, we got a little time left, a minute or two. Well, I'll comment that the ceremony yesterday in the rotunda was very moving, very solemn, very dignified, commemorating 9/11. And it happens every year at 12 noon on September 11th. So if you missed it yesterday, put it in your calendar for next year. Kevin Shea was the first responder in New York City that morning, and he talked about his experience, and it was really something listening to him. The only thing was the acoustics in the rotunda are less than ideal, and I wish that Kevin could have gotten a lesson from Annie, because it was somewhat difficult to hear him. But it was what I thought was very, very, very worthwhile. So put that down for next year. What else is going on? Commissioner Hunthausen, how you doing?
Good.
Yeah, give him that mic, Eddie. Uh-oh.
All right.
There we go.
Well, the rain and Mr. Griffin reminded me of a couple of things I just wanted to mention. One, the rain, it's important. Eric used to be the Public Works Director of Lucas Park County. We worked together for over 15 years. And that's why I had his phone number memorized. So someone asked me, I wrote it down. And I'll talk about him first. His story is amazing, and both from a tragic perspective, but also from a heroic perspective and a perseverance perspective. And he talked about people helping him and being there for him when he was at his lowest moments. Well, he's been there for me many times when things have been heavy in my life, and I just want to thank him very much. And one thing he didn't talk about in Omni Walk is if you donate $100, you get one of those fancy T-shirts.
Free shirt.
Oh, yeah. So I'm going for the T-shirt. No, it's a great cause. It's wonderful. But he also reminded me about this. And yesterday there was a flood warning. You saw what happened downtown last night. Some of you probably did. Jim mentioned the boulevard. Well, there's all kinds of that happening throughout the community. We need the water so badly, but we don't need it all at once, and it's really difficult in this environment to handle this much water so quickly. So we've already closed some roads out in the community, and some of the where we've had fires, like the Horse Gulch Fire, Jimtown Road is closed, it's washed out a couple of spots, there's campers that are stranded, all kinds of things. So just a word of caution and warning, be careful out there, prepare your property for flooding, those that have basements in the valley. It's crazy that we've had such a hot, dry summer, but you might get water in your basement. So be prepared for that, and be cautious. Don't drive through water and all those kinds of things if you can. So just wanted to word of caution and thank Eric, and appreciate that everybody come out for the Nami Walk.
Very good. Thanks, Commissioner. You know, the county's done a lot of work on flood control in the last 10 years or so. The valley especially. How about Augusta and Lincoln? They survived that thing last night?
Well, as far as I know, but it was heavy, a lot of rain all at once. There is a flood district in the Helena Valley and a flood plan, and we have, I don't know, about $15 million worth of projects identified. And so we're slowly working our way from Lake Helena backwards up to, you see the big project that happened around Rossiter School. We're trying to do projects like that all through the flood zone of the valley and try to help water move through that area more efficiently. We're not going to stop flooding, but we want to have it do less damage as it comes through the valley. And then same in Lincoln and Augusta, we have projects up there as well. So.
Very good. It's still a state of extremes, though, isn't it, Andy? Yep. Well, it's 8 o'clock, and I guess the day beginneth. So thank you all very much for coming. Shannon, thank you very, very much. It was a great presentation.
All right.